Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. This is episode number 64. Today we're talking about 0.107. We're talking about Lightify saying goodbye. And we're saying hey to Quentin.
Hello there.
Hello. And as usual, we've got Phil. Hey, Phil.
Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, I should say.
That's right, depending on wherever you are. I guess today on this episode, we got one of everything, right? So
yeah, exactly.
We have every time zone covered, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily and securely access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that also supports the Home Assistant project. Configuration is via the user interface, so no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or YAML.
But let's get right into it. You know, we got messaged earlier this week saying, "Hey, Rohan, Phil, have a look at this. It's kind of interesting." So Lightify, who's I guess it's kind of a spin-off by Osram. It's one of their brands. They're closing their cloud servers in August 2021. So what that means is if you use Lightify, you're not going to have those capabilities. Now, this is a Zigbee-based product. So there's the ability to have some kind of local control, but unfortunately, a lot of the control, it sounds like, will be going away with the cloud servers. Unfortunately, so
yeah, I have some Lightify bulbs, and I just used them with the Hue hub. They didn't work very well, actually. I now use them just straight through Home Assistant, but for simple stuff, they will work fine. I don't think I've ever used the cloud.
Yeah, so on off that kind of stuff should work, right? I'm not sure what kind of more advanced functionality there is. Quentin, do you know, since you use it?
No, I got a few of them because fairly early on, when Hue didn't have a very wide range of bulbs, I wanted some candle bulbs and a couple of things like that, and Lightify did those before Hue did, but they weren't so good, frankly, when it came to dimming them down to very low levels and so on. So I have a few that I use around the house now, but I'm not doing anything fancy with them. I'm basically turning them on and off.
Right.
I have a whole bunch of the Lightify downlights, the MR16 downlights, and I actually got a Lightify gateway because I couldn't pair them with the Hue hub. So I was pretty interested when they said that they're actually going to close the gateway down, and I took a look at what functionalities they're actually going to be removing as of next year, and they're not even going to be providing firmware updates to the light bulbs anymore. So even if you have a Philips Hue hub or whatever, there's not going to be any firmware updates to the light bulbs themselves. So that's a bit of a bummer. Right. So I guess if you have any Lightify light bulbs, you should get yourself a Lightify gateway, probably on the cheap now, and do the firmware upgrades right up until they close it down if you want to get the latest and greatest. There's also a few other weird things that will just stop working. So obviously the Google Home and Amazon Echo will stop working, but you won't be able to add any smart plugs anymore. So if you have a Lightify gateway, you can still use it locally, but you won't be able to add some products. You won't be able to add smart switches. You won't be even able to delete them from the system for whatever reason. And maybe it's all tied to a cloud account. You can't delete favorites, you can't delete or create, groups and all that. So it's going to be a very restricted device come next year. So I would encourage anyone to just get off that ecosystem as quick as you can. I think decons and Zigbee to MQTT are probably your best open bet.
Yeah.
I drive mine through ZHA at the moment, and as I say, I've only got a couple of the lights, so I haven't played with any of the other bits of the ecosystem. Are they easy to pair up? Do you know? Are they the smart plugs and things?
On ZHA, it's fairly simple.
Yeah, I think I'm using decons, and I've got all the Lightify light bulbs now running through that without any problem.
Yeah, and I mean, as that goes on, Philips Hue also continues deprecating their version 1 hub. If you want to keep using the V1 bridge, you'll basically need to download another Hue app, which is meant to work with that bridge. But again, Phil, do we know if that's something? Is that a long-term solution, or are you going to be out
I
of
think
luck
this is it.
when?
I think they're going to offer the V1 app, and then that's it. They're not going to update that V1 app moving forward. So
Right.
if new versions of iOS, Android come along, eventually they're just going to say it's a legacy product. We're not supporting it anymore. Good luck, sort of thing. So
Right. So you might need to have a device on like iOS 12 or something like that when iOS 30 is out, right? So-
exactly.
okay.
Not an ideal solution. And that's even if it's still available in those app stores as well.
Right, exactly. And which they might take it out, or there's a whole bunch of possibilities there, right? Or you might, on the Android world, you might have to download and archive that APK somewhere.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something like that, which is, I mean, it's frustrating, right? But at least they're not killing the product altogether. Like it's not the Hue is shutting down. It's just that V1 is stopping. Not that that's any consolence if you've paid for that already, right?
Particularly if you've got 100 light bulbs that you need to relink, right?
Yeah,
relinking them is a pain. On the other hand, if you've got 100 light bulbs, you've spent so much on those light bulbs that the cost of a new hub is pretty small. I think these are like £40 here. What's that? $50-$60. So it's not insignificant, but it's probably not much more than a light bulb or two. So, and they are pretty old now, the V1 hubs. So yeah, the labor of repairing is probably more of a hassle. Though actually, I think when I upgraded mine, which was quite a while ago, I think the pairings were carried across automatically.
Really?
interesting.
I think there was an upgrade your hub thing in the app or something like that. My memory may be wrong, but I think it wasn't painful.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's something.
Of course, I didn't have nearly so many lights then.
On some positive news, Nabu Casa Cloud, on the other side of the spectrum, adds 5 new data centers, which is great. So essentially what that translates to for users is that you're reducing latency. Closer data center means less time your packet has to travel, and so on and so forth. Basically, the faster you press a button, basically, if you go to a closer data center, when you click a button, it just translates to a light turning on or whatever's that much faster, right?
I don't know for you guys, but I've noticed like loading up the Home Assistant app and waiting to connect through Nabu Casa. For me being in Australia away from all those data centers, it does add, 1 to 5 seconds of a delay. Have you guys noticed that on your side?
No.
No? Okay, it just sucks to be me.
No, but I think even though I've got the Nabu Casa account, I've got the Nabu Casa account, but I normally just connect direct. I think the URL I normally use doesn't.
I'm particularly excited for this update because I think having closer data centers will just make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. And Phil, to your point, there's no actual effort required from your side. So on the next reboot, basically, it'll go out and it'll say, hey, this is my closest one, and go connect to that one.
Yeah. So I think it'll be backwards compatible even if you don't upgrade your Home Assistant to the latest and greatest release. As soon as you try and connect to the Nabu Casa Cloud. I could be wrong here, and I'm sure Paulus and Pascal will correct me.
Yeah, I don't see why there should be a correlation, especially if they use something like DNS or whatever. It should be, whatever's the quickest. So again, I don't know that for sure, but
so 0.107 is here, and I think, Rohan, we were discussing this offline earlier in the week. One of the most exciting features that I think is coming out on the way to that version 1 release. We keep talking about this version 1 release coming up, and this is one of those features that I think is finally, to me, I can actually see a great use case, and it's multiple Lovelace dashboards. So now you can have, multiple different views in Lovelace. You can have different tabs, and you can save them for different user levels. You can restrict them so only admins can access certain views. It's awesome. So I'm already planning to have a tablet view, an admin view, maybe a guest view. What do you guys think of this? To me, I'm really excited.
Yeah, I think this is great. I have a little tablet in my kitchen which I run HA Dashboard on, and that works very nicely for me. I've never yet felt the urge to switch it over to anything else, but I keep looking. And one of the things, I have thought would be if it were easy to do a more restricted one in Lovelace, that this would be worth trying anyway. So I'm certainly going to give this a go. And I suspect my wife would like, to the extent she ever uses any of this, she'd probably like a simpler one, which just turns on and off the stuff that she's interested in. So even just for her browser.
At first, I mean, Phil, you know this. I mean, when we were chatting, I was like, okay, cool. What's the point? But you actually brought up a great point, right? Is when you need these different UIs for whether it's different folks, so on and so forth. For me personally, I don't see a huge requirement for it, just because let's call it 95% of what I do, if not more, is based on voice, right? Yes. I use my Amazon Echoes or Google Homes to say, hey, turn on the lights or turn off the lights, and everything else is kind of it just happens, right? It's automation. Will I use it? Maybe. I don't think, right now, I don't know that I have a requirement for it, but I do. But if I were to have tablets and things like that, I think this is definitely a very valid use case, right? Yeah. And in my case, I don't today.
What about you, Phil? Do you have a tablet of any sort?
I have 2 currently, and I've got a spare one in the cupboard ready to go when I have another use case. So I've got one in the bedroom, one in the kitchen. And right now they're just running the same Lovelace UI. So it's basically God mode, right? The same that I have on my computer. But now I could potentially have, the one in the kitchen can't, control things in the bedroom, because now I'll have different Lovelace views so that, they can't control, the lights in the bedroom, or they can't turn the TV off and on from the kitchen, and I guess I've got people obviously I trust in the home, but I think for people with kids, maybe they want to be able to offer kids a nice Lovelace view that they can control. I think we had James on last episode who had his daughter that had some lights in her bedroom. She could only have a restricted view to her bedroom and not be able to change, the parents' bedroom and all that. And now this is possible thanks to those restrictions.
Yeah, and I guess my tablet's quite small. It's not, it's not like my iPad, or it's not, certainly not like, the screen I sit in front of. So I would want to configure things differently. And the HA dashboard works very well for this, because it gives you nice sort of finger-sized buttons for a sort of touch screen rather than a more traditional kind of web GUI. And I haven't played with, configuring Lovelace for that mode, but I can see how I'd want a different layout for an 8-inch tablet from what I'd want for other devices I use.
Yeah, and I mean, even if so, another example is something like so we had Isabella on in episode 25, and she's she created this awesome UI after that episode that kind of mimics the whole Google Home interface, and actually looks really nice, right? But at the same time, that may not translate well to the web version of her instance, right? So tablet might look really nice. And I'm not sure if this is the case, though, so don't kill me if I'm wrong on that one. But it's there's a great use case there, right, where you can have these different dashboards for different devices or purposes or whatever, just so it looks nice for your own use. So so also something cool. So there's a new card picker with a live preview. So when you're playing around in the interface and you're editing the Lovelace UI, you actually get to see this preview of the card. So it says, hey, this is what it looks like, and kind of this is similar to what you're going to see, right, based on your data. I mean, I haven't upgraded just yet, so I haven't actually seen it, but it actually looks kind of cool.
This is fantastic for people that don't want to create their UI in YAML. They want to just be able to use what you see is what you get editor, and the work done on this feature alone, I think, really pushes forward that ease of use for non-technical people. So there's some great work gone into that one.
Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly who is behind these ones, but it sounds like there's more emphasis being put on that UI and getting the UI to be more friendly, basically, right? So I think who's ever driving that priority, thank you. And I think that's a huge, that's to me, that's probably one of the biggest things that's stopping that whole 1.0 release, right? So I'm glad that that's happening.
And Rohan, I'm sure this is not going to be any surprise to you, but those people that you want to thank is Zach and Thomas Lovin.
Yeah, that actually doesn't surprise me at all.
They are masters. They've done so much good work with the UI and front end on Home Assistant, so it's good to see them back and getting some really cool stuff out.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, something that I am really happy to see is that data tables are so much faster now in this new release. So if you use the states developer tools a lot and you need to go in and find an entity and manually turn it off and on. If you use it on a phone or on a computer and you needed to filter an entity, it was painfully slow, especially when you've got a lot of entities like I do. It is now super fast on everything, and I'm so glad they've done it, especially when, I don't know, like you want the light, like you need to turn off an automation if the light's turning on, and you need to do it really fast. And of course, you rip out the phone because it's in your pocket, and then it takes ages for that table to load. It's just little things like this that make it a whole lot better for me.
HomeKit's getting some love as well. So it's got a couple of new features. So there's now initial basic support for HomeKit enabled TVs and their occupancy sensors that are HomeKit enabled. So that's kind of cool.
Like HomeKit just seems to be. I love that. Usually, when I think of Apple, it's always the locked down walled garden. That's it. You won't be able to get anything out of it, but the guys working on this HomeKit integration have been able to integrate it so nicely into Home Assistant, and it's all local, right? Like, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the cooler things about HomeKit is that it's not actually cloud, which you would think Apple would, push you towards more of that iCloud kind of world. All the control is local, so meaning it's actually snappy and it is still on-premise. And for most part, HomeKit devices aren't exclusively HomeKit, right? If they're HomeKit, then they're probably also Wi-Fi, so on and so forth.
They tried to do that whole, you need to get a special HomeKit chip enabled. That's why originally the Philips Hue version 2 hub came out, and that was the HomeKit enabled hub, because Apple said, if you want to be HomeKit enabled, you have to have our approved hardware. And then, of course, no manufacturer is going to go out and redo their whole product line just to be HomeKit enabled. So then Apple backtracked, and now they've got this software certification, which has made HomeKit explode, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a security thing, wasn't it, originally? And I think they wanted, I don't know, maybe it was just that they wanted profit from, that's right. It may have been. They've discovered you can do this in software as well. I've got some window blinds, which I had to, we could talk about later. I had to jump through quite a lot of hoops to get the old hub that controls them to talk to Home Assistant. And they've got a new hub now. This is a Rollies hub, and the new one is HomeKit compatible, and I am wondering whether I should just get the new hub. I don't know whether Home Assistant will do HomeKit controlled window
it's not long
blinds
until
yet,
it happens.
But that may well be an easier way to go than my custom system.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it's kind of neat. So
all right, heaps of breaking changes, as of course these releases are much bigger now, and there's a whole bunch of breaking changes coming with them. But one thing that I actually got, and I mentioned before, I got stuck up on, is that because of the States UI has now been removed, there's a whole bunch of group and automation functionalities that have been removed as of this release. So, for example, if you've got set visibility in, say, visible true or visible false in your groups file, your groups.yaml file, that's actually going to cause a whole lot of headaches. And surprisingly, I didn't get pushed into safe mode. I just ended up having my groups were disabled, and because groups weren't available, it actually caused a whole lot of other components not to load. So my lights didn't load, my fans didn't load. I think there was some errors about vacuum cleaners. I don't have a vacuum cleaner, but because the groups component failed, they all failed, and it just completely stuffed up everything, and it didn't push me into safe mode, which I was actually surprised about. So you will have to go in. I had to do group visibility, group control. So there was, in the old States UI, you could turn off groups having the master control for all the devices. And then in automations, there is that set visibility flag. So this is going to be a big, if you are a legacy Home Assistant user that was using the old States UI at some point in time, this is something that you should probably watch out for before upgrading.
Right.
And some other cool noteworthy updates that are in this release. For those using the ZHA component, so Quentin, listen up. The lights now support flashing, and this is something that I really love. I've loved since the Philips Hue hub moved over. I was excited when ZigBee to MQTT finally implemented it, because I use it for my Amazon Echo timers. So when an Echo timer is complete, it will go in and it will tell all the ZigBee lights to flash. So what it'll do is it will just flash the lights, but because it's locally done on the bulb, Home Assistant just needs to send out one command. It doesn't have to turn off and on, and get a delay. So really cool to see that implemented in ZHA as well.
That's neat. Also, there's SMS support now for Pushbullet. So you can actually use Pushbullet to send you text messages, which is kind of neat. I might actually look at that.
There are so many ways you can send notifications now, aren't there? I mean, I don't know what you guys use. I tend to just use the Home Assistant app on iOS, and I get most of my notifications just from that. But do you? You've got dozens of ways you could be notified.
Yeah. I do the exact same.
The Amazon Echo can now start and stop timers. So this will be cool if you want to use Home Assistant to control the timer. So a lot of people will use timers when they want to delay lights turning off or on. They can now be exposed to the Amazon Echo as another device that can be turned off and on. So you might be able to say, to your Amazon Echo, turn off the living room lights timer, and it'll turn it off or delay it or restart it. There is, if you're using the US version of the Amazon Echo, if you've got your language set to US English, I think there is also some other timers are actually natively supported on the Echo, so you might be able to do some more advanced stuff as well, but that's not available for all regions. But this new one, just using the power turn on, turn off state, can be used anywhere.
That's kind of interesting. One of the things I was going to ask you guys about was, motion sensors in rooms. So a lot of my rooms, you walk into and the lights go on, and when it thinks there's no motion, the lights go off. And it's not always very, sometimes I sit too still, or particularly if I'm watching a movie and the fire's going it's like you have to, it's plunged into darkness, and you have to kind of wave it here. So sometimes you can get around that if you've got another sensor that, can detect that you're sitting on your office chair or something. And so you say, only turn the lights off if the office chair isn't occupied or something. But I don't have that in the sitting room when I'm watching movies so much, or actually, no, I do for that, but I don't have for some other things. And I wonder whether actually, if you could implement those as timers, and then you could say, actually, it's happened once, but turn off that timer now. I wonder if that would be, I'm not sure if that's a good use for it, because you'd
have to know the timer's running.
You have to know, yeah, exactly. So you almost want it to announce, I've detected motion, I've turned on the lights, and the timer called what is now running, and then you can say turn off that timer if it isn't.
That's going to get annoying very quickly.
Yeah. You're going to do the first two times. You're going to quickly remove that.
Yeah, not doing that. Yeah.
Now, before we get to you, Mr. Quentin, Rohan, I want to grill you about one of your new things that you were talking to me about. You told me you got a new lock. It's a smart lock, and I was like, all right, I didn't want to bug you too much about it because I wanted to basically grill you in public.
Yeah, of course. What better way is there?
Exactly right. Tell everyone what sort of lock you got.
I got the Wiser Kivo. So it's the same as a Kwikset Kivo, or I think they have one other brand that they market it as. In Canada, it's Wiser. So yeah, I got that. It's a Bluetooth lock. Actually, one of the reasons I chose it is because I guess whoever made my door didn't do a great job. So what happens is that so I have a window in my door as well, or a glass pane in my door, and that pane of glass is actually too close to the actual hole for the lock. So several years ago, I got an August just to play with it. Yeah. And unfortunately, I had to return it because the August mechanism itself was too big, where it was actually sitting on, it wasn't sitting flush against the door. It was actually sitting against the frame of the glass pane that they had put in. And I wasn't going to sit there just to make it work. I wasn't going to sit there and cut out that frame and, so on and so forth. It's not worth it. I'll probably end up either breaking something or losing some efficiency in the insulation that it provides and such as well. So, I decided I was waiting for the Kivo version 2 locks to come out. The V1s, apparently, and I'm no lock expert, but from everything I had read, the version 1s actually had an issue where they could be bumped very easily.
Yeah, that's what I was reading, and that's why I was a bit concerned for you.
Yeah, so you would think that a lock manufacturer would have that part figured out yet, but apparently they didn't. So there, I guess it was also time to market, right? Hey, how can I quickly get something called Smart out to the market, so on and so forth. So I did get this Kivo lock. I'm sure there are others nowadays that are slimmer, but this is one that's readily available for me. And, I just popped by Home Depot and grabbed it. And if in the event that it didn't fit, because this was a concern for me, it's not necessarily a concern for a lot of people, but if it didn't fit, I did have that ability. And I did check with the associate at Home Depot going, hey, listen, I'm going to buy this, but I don't actually know if it'll work. And they're like, yeah, just bring it back. I'm like, okay, cool. So give me a bit of security around that, right? I don't want to just spend like $250 and be like, well, I'm now stuck with this door hardware. Right, exactly. That I can't, return or what have you. So, unfortunately, it doesn't integrate natively with Home Assistant. I have seen some where people have actually made custom integrations, but I don't have the hub yet, so I haven't played with that.
Yeah, so they were going to be my questions, because I looked at this for potentially replacing one of the locks on my doors here, even though I'm renting. It did seem the closest size that I could just replace that lock with, and then put the original one back in when I leave.
Yeah.
But being Bluetooth, that really concerns me. One, of course, do you still have to carry keys around in case, for whatever reason, the Bluetooth isn't working, or you come home drunk and your phone's battery's dead? Like, are they concerns that you've got?
Yeah.
So for me personally, yes. And the reason is because I have one door in and out of my house.
Yep.
So even though it is a house, and most homes in my neighborhood have like a second door through the garage or whatever.
Right.
I don't. The people that lived in this house before me, I guess they went out of their way. This is actually a really huge pet peeve of mine. So I may go off on a rant, and I apologize if the people that lived in my house are listening to this podcast, because I don't know what you're thinking. They paid extra money to not have a door in the garage, and I've always grown up. So in the house I lived in with my family growing up, we always had that. So I always had that, security where, okay, let's say I break the key in the lock or something like that, which can happen when it's -40 outside.
Of course, yeah.
I have the ability to actually just be like, okay, well, I'll just go in the other door for now and then fix this later. I don't have that comfort now. And for whatever reason, that's actually a huge point of paranoia for me. So I do have some concerns. So I do have my key. They also do have a Bluetooth fob.
Okay, that's
where
cool.
I can have that instead of my key.
Okay.
I just find the key is thinner, and I just find it easier that I don't actually have to do anything to it. Just I don't have to. That key is a one-off.
Right.
So you're braver than me. I like knowing when the doors are open and closed, but I've never trusted my home automation actually to open and close them for me. Lock and unlock them for me yet. So is this? I mean, I can see the attraction, because it means if you've got someone who's visiting for a short while, you can effectively give them a key for a short period, can't you? If you have a cleaner or someone who comes in occasionally, then they can gain access, but only at certain times and so on. But is it powered? Do you have to wire it in, or is it battery?
It's battery. And obviously the key works as your fail-safe, the physical key itself. But it, from everything I've read, and I've only had it for a couple of weeks now. I haven't had the cycle to actually go through one battery change or whatever. But from everything everyone tells me, it does give you enough of a heads up, unless let's say I'm out of the house, or I'm traveling or something for, I don't know, a month or two, then maybe I might run into those problems. But outside of that, I don't, it doesn't look like a lot of people have had those kind of issues. Just in the research I've done. Again, I haven't been through that cycle yet. So, but if I'm traveling, I'll take a physical key with me as well anyway. So,
have you shared access with anyone, or do you need to use an app, or how does access control work?
Yeah. I decided to give my partner who lives with me. I decided to give her access to the keys.
Oh, very nice of you. Very nice. Yeah.
Right. I thought so. Yeah. Yeah. So she's got access. And I have given it to a friend of mine as well. But he hasn't popped by yet. So let's see.
Okay.
I know initially there were some concerns about different phone models and stuff actually being able to support the functionality. I don't know if that's still an issue, but let's. I guess I'll find out over time.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see how you go.
Yeah, the whole idea does make a lot of sense to me. That you move into a new house or a new apartment or something, and you have to, you may want to change all the locks and things like. It'd be nice if that were a thing of the past. You basically, show the new owner, here's the magic number you need, right? I no longer have access, you have access, and all of that stuff. But it does take a certain amount of faith in the technology, doesn't it? When you start saying, you can open my front door if this goes wrong.
Well, exactly. And it's nice, too, because it's also got an audit log of who's opened, who's closed, unless you use a physical key, in which case it doesn't. But yeah, so but that's so one of the main motivations was actually that key sharing functionality, because I have I have friends that pop by, whatever, and inevitably I'm always, whenever these guys come by, I'm either in the shower or I'm in the basement and don't hear or whatever it is, right? I'm otherwise preoccupied. Right. So
especially if it's minus 40 outside, you don't want them chilling outside too much.
Well, and the other thing is too, right? Because sometimes, especially in the winter and stuff, that's exactly it, right? So a lot of times, depending on who's coming by, they might actually come by while I'm still, like, let's call it during working hours. So I might be on calls until they and I mean, most of my friends have figured out that they can make themselves at home and go into the fridge, grab whatever they want, whatever. Anyways, so, but this way I can at least, just without having to run off from my video call with whether it's my customers or my colleagues or whoever it is, I don't have to, run up, be like, oh, sorry guys, hold on, right? So it looks less professional as well. So this way I can just kind of, yes, it's not in Home Assistant, but I can just pop open the app and press the button, and the range does. I was actually surprised from inside how long the range is.
Okay.
So I was actually pretty impressed.
Yeah, I don't drive anything through Bluetooth that way, because I just kind of assume that there would be too many bits of the house from which I couldn't access it. But if it were a Zigbee door lock, that would be better. But I'm not sure that Zigbee. I don't know whether the Zigbee security stuff is better or worse than Bluetooth. I haven't looked into that, but.
Yeah, I don't know that any of them really have the best security. So,
All right. Well, Quentin, I think this brings us as a good chance to focus on you now. So I guess let's start off with the basics. We always like to find out, how did you get into Home Assistant, or how long have you been using Home Assistant for, and where did you start out?
Yeah, well, I've been playing with home automation. Well, not really home automation. I've had smart devices in the house for for many years now, and we moved house about 2.5 years ago. And in the old house, I had Hue lights and I had Sonos speakers, and then this Evo Home, this Honeywell heating system, which gives me individual control of each radiator, and that was all great. But I had one key challenge, which is that my wife basically doesn't carry a phone, or she hasn't until fairly recently. She never really carried her phone around. She certainly didn't do anything adventurous like installing apps on it. So anything I put into the house had to be operatable just through like switches on the wall and something that didn't require you to have a smartphone. So, I started buying Hue lights when you could actually get physical switches to go on the wall. And the Evo Home heating system has a nice little control panel, much like a traditional heating system and so on. So there was no need for a phone. Now, when I moved to the new house, I had a lot more lights and a lot more space, and I was thinking more about how, what I might do here. And in particular, there were some lights that, in the kitchen, we've got like 9 downlighters, and if you work out how much that costs in Hue bulbs, if you're going to replace all of them, it starts becoming quite expensive. And I needed more motion sensors.
I've done it. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You know the pain, right? So I had quite a lot of the Hue motion sensors. That was about that was the thing that really got me actually in liking this in the hallways and the stairways and so on. I realized that having the lights. Having not to hit a light switch is a really good thing. So, who was it? Someone who said, it might have been one of you guys said, if you still have to press a switch, it's not really automation, is it? It's like when motion sensors, I realized, were were very important in this world. But the Hue ones, even though they're very good, they're still fairly expensive. I can't remember what they are. They're like $40 or something. And so when I got into the new house, I thought, this is a bigger house. I'm going to need a lot of motion sensors here, and that's going to add up. So I was starting to think about, could I use something else for that sort of simple presence detection? So that got me looking around a little bit. Another thing I had already tied into a little bit was we had an Amazon Echo, and I've got an electric car. I've got a BMW i3, and a friend and I managed to sort of reverse engineer the unofficial API fairly early on, so that when I got my Echo, I did a little skill so I could ask it, what's the state of charge, or what's the current range and things like that, which was quite fun. But I think Home Assistant has this gateway drug, which is the SD card image for the Raspberry Pi, right? Because it is so easy for most people to get started with that. And I had a quick look at OpenHab, I think, because it had a sort of single click installer that I could put onto my Synology box. But it didn't quite grab me, and I was reading more stuff around this, and it seemed to be that Home Assistant was where it was at. And when I discovered, there's an SD card image, I've probably got 3 or 4 Raspberry Pis, hanging around, and I just plugged it into one of them, and it was like, oh, I can see you've got Hue lights. Would you like me to control those? Oh yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. I can see you've got Sonos speakers. Would you like me to control? Oh yeah. And all of a sudden, I had this really easy way to integrate stuff, which I'd never felt a great deal of desire to do before. But I suddenly started realizing I can buy these really cheap sensors now and still control my Hue lights. And so I think the first thing I did was actually, the REST interface thing, because I'd written this little skill for Alexa, which talked to my service that talked to my car, and that service had a REST interface. And so, with in a few seconds almost, I could connect my Home Assistant to my car and do things like make the lights flash green when it was fully charged and things like that.
Yeah.
And this was just too much fun, and it really didn't take very long. Another thing, one of my favorite add-ons, which or integration. Well, what I always get the names wrong. It's a plugin, I guess, technically.
Don't worry, we get it wrong too.
Yeah. It's Hue Sensor Advanced, right? I don't know if you use, but if you have, like I have, I've still got all my Hue lights and all my Hue sensors on the Hue Hub, right? And the Hue Hub has a nice API for turning the lights on and off. And you can ask it the state of some of the sensors, but it doesn't kind of emit events when you press a button or when there's a motion sensor or whatever. And so what this plugin does is basically allow Home Assistant to pull the Hue Hub frequently and say, has a button been pressed? Has motion been detected? And this seems terribly untidy that you keep hitting your hub repeatedly to do this, but actually it works really, really well. And it was probably almost the first plugin I ever installed.
Is this a Home Assistant plugin?
Yeah, Home Assistant plugin. It's called, I think, Hue Sensor Advanced. At least it is now. Let me just see.
I'm guessing it's in the community store that you can get it from there.
It is in the community store now, yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So if you have a Hue Hub and you have Philips devices connected to it, sensors and switches and so on, then you can use those as sensors in Home Assistant and switches in Home Assistant. So I still have my Hue World independent, just because it's always been very, very reliable. And it's, I like to think that if my whole Home Assistant world goes down, my wife can still turn the lights on and off. So I do have all sorts of separate Zigbee stuff that I drive from Home Assistant, but essentially it's interacting with the Hue system, which is the sort of, base system for me. And there will come a point where I switch everything over to Home Assistant, but at the moment, I do have 2 Zigbee meshes because I've got the Hue stuff and I've got a Combi as well. Which I'm trying to visit. So it just became kind of fun to realize, in particular, all these really cheap Xiaomi Zigbee sensors, and all of the Tasmotor, the ESP8266 stuff that you could reflash. And I suddenly discovered that, I could do things. I could control the other lights that weren't Hue lights. I could do this sort of stuff far more cheaply than if I actually bought the Philips stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love the Philips Hue stuff. It's been so reliable. It's been brilliant. But, for things that aren't mission critical, where it's just kind of fun, you can do a great deal a lot more cheaply if you have Home Assistant in the mix, and it's so easy to get started with a Raspberry Pi. So that's kind of how I got into it. One of the other things I did with the car, by the way, is the BMW key has this annoying thing that if you press it, it's sometimes useful. If you press and hold the open button on the key, then the car sunroof opens and the windows open and so on, which is great unless you do it by accident. So if you're sitting on the sofa watching a movie and you're actually sitting on your key, and outside your car is opening up, right, and then it rains overnight and you discover it in the morning. So one of the first things I did, I actually had this before I had Home Assistant, but it became very easy to do it in Home Assistant, was just once an hour I get a notification if my car is unlocked or the windows are open or the sunroof's open. And so if I'm driving around, I occasionally get these notifications, but it does mean that I very rarely leave the sunroof open overnight when it rains. You could probably even tie it in somehow to a weather forecast.
You sound like you've been burned by that before.
Yes, I have got in the morning and found very wet seats. Yeah.
No.
And again, it's very easy to do. There's now a slight. Well, I don't think it's an official API, but I don't use my custom stuff anymore. There's the whole BIMA connected stuff for being, which I think is again using an unofficial interface. But I can see things like whether the doors are locked. What the range is, whether the car's charging, what the state of charge is, and so on. And that's all part of my Home Assistant display, which is kind of fun. So then I was running this on a Raspberry Pi for a while. I moved it onto a sort of Intel NUC type box. Actually, first of all, I moved the database onto my Synology to try which did speed it up a bit when that wasn't there. Then I moved the whole thing onto an Intel NUC, and to my surprise, it was a lot faster, but it became much less reliable. And I thought, why was this? And I thought, I really love this Home Assistant stuff. I'm just waiting to when it's really reliable enough to do what I wanted to do. And then I discovered actually it was a problem with the SSD in my my NUC. And when I replaced the SSD, it's been really solid since then. But obviously Home Assistant has also improved a great deal in terms of reliability in the meantime. But it was interesting that a dead SSD was the thing that was making me think this was actually unreliable, and it was a hardware problem in the end. So.
Wow.
And then I started going a bit wild, and I bought lots of these Xiaomi sensors, and I bought a combi stick, and I bought Sonoff things, and I've had great fun. There's lots of stuff all over the house that's connected up, and my wife is very tolerant of this, but she doesn't touch any of it. I don't think she's ever even spoken to the Amazon Echo except perhaps to say stop. So she's very tolerant of my hobbies, but as long as it just works and she doesn't have to actually control it, she's fine. But it does make me wonder about things like if something ever happened to me, right? I don't know if you guys have good solutions for this, but what's your recovery thing? Imagine you're away and your significant other or even, you get coronavirus and you have to go into deep isolation somewhere else and so on. What happens if your box dies? What happens if your SSD dies or your power supply in your Home Assistant box dies? I think one of you running it on Kerberos or on Docker Swarm or something like that? Is that?
Yeah.
Does that give you redundancy as well, or is that just on one box?
So kind of. So yeah. So basically, that was I was testing it in my quote unquote production environment. It's still a single Docker instance, but yeah, in Swarm, when you have a couple of boxes, basically what happens is if box number 1 dies, kind of box number 2 just Swarm kind of goes, oh, okay, and it has the ability, and Kubernetes is the same, and so on and so forth. I got through this whole phase where I was like, okay, I'm not dealing with a bunch of stuff right now. I just want this to work. I got really busy and everything, so all of that stuff kind of got put to the side. But yeah. There are mechanisms where you can do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that would make it more or less resilient in my absence.
Yeah,
because you then have to know how to operate that. I mean, I think this is an interesting challenge at the moment.
Yes.
Everything I do, I mean, Home Assistant is more and more important to me, but it's important in a kind of fun way rather than anything critical depending on it. If my Home Assistant box is switched off, everything still works. You might have to press the button to make the light go on, but it will still go on, right? You might not be able to ask the Amazon lady to turn them on for you, but nonetheless, and the heating still works and so on. And at a certain point, you sort of switch over to it being actually critical to the way your house operates. And at that point, it's, you wonder what would happen if anything happened to me, right? Especially if you're not the only person who lives there.
Well, and that's it, right? And it's like you said, like having physical switches and all that kind of stuff. That's where that kind of stuff gets important, right? Is from a user. For me, it was more around the guest experience, and even for my partner, for her to use it at first, just to get her used to the idea of you don't necessarily need to press it. Mm-hmm. That's what. But I still have a friend who every time she comes over, even though she's completely able to use everything manually, she's like, I don't know how this house works. So I'm like, just press the light switch.
Right. Yeah.
It's actually a pretty, it can be a pretty morbid topic, but if you're interested, there is another Australian guy. His name is Jonathan Oxer. He has smarthouse.tv, I think his YouTube channel is, and he has a whole bunch of stuff in his house that is, every light switch is automated and all that. And he's actually tackling, with a succession plan, if something was to happen to him, how, what happens, right? Because obviously his family's going to have to inherit this house and how it all works. So I think he's gone to the point of level where he actually copies all firmware versions onto a USB stick, keeps, instructions with all the lights. So if an electrician comes in and needs to change a light in the future, there's instructions on what he did, the wiring diagrams and all that. So there's a YouTube video. I'll try and find it and leave it in the show notes. It's pretty the way he talks about it. And I think it's an important topic to think about. Future planning, and to his credit, he's pretty open and frank with it and puts his ideas out there.
Yeah, I mean, we own this house. We're not renting, but there's also the question of, if we sell the house, how much time do I actually have to spend taking out all of the stuff or explaining it to whoever, well, there's this thing called an MQTT broker, and you're going to have to run one of those. And it's not really like
I'm not doing that.
No.
So, if I'm selling my house, I'm taking stuff with me.
You take it out. Yeah, exactly. Same here, I think. So then I started playing a bit. So I had a few, one of the automations that we use pretty much every single day, and there's one I sort of demo to people because it's kind of fun, is just in the evening we finish eating and we usually go through and watch something, whether it be Netflix or a DVD or something like that. So I can tell the Echo it's movie time. And at that point, the lights go down in the kitchen and the lights go down in the hallway, and in the sitting room, the lights all go low, and the ones that could reflect in the television get switched off, and the temperature goes up 1 degree, and the TV turns on. And then when we're finished, right, it's I say movie time is over, at which point everything goes back to where it was before. And I've now got one of the little Xiaomi buttons which does the same thing, actually. So if I don't feel like talking to the Echo to do this, I can press a little button, and that makes you feel a bit less silly. But I used to just have those events run the automation directly, a little script directly. And in the end, what I did was the events, the button presses or the, talking to Amazon, they set an input select. They do a thing saying, we're in movie time or we're not in movie time. And then it's the change of that toggle that actually triggers everything else. And so you can change that toggle in lots of different ways, but it also means you can use that as a state. So I can say, actually, don't turn off the lights on a motion sensor if it's movie time, things like that.
Yes.
So that's kind of fun. So that's fun to show friends. But actually, some of the automations I like have been very small things, like in our bedroom. the wardrobe was a bit dark. There are lights near the wardrobe, but often, at least, if one of us is asleep or first thing in the morning, you open the wardrobe doors, it's a bit hard to see what's going on in there. So I've got a little door window sensor, one of the Xiaomi ones there, and when you open the doors, the light that's right near the wardrobe comes on. But none of the other lights in the bedroom. So if my wife's coming in late at night, and it's just so easy to do, right? I already had a Hue bulb in there for those little Xiaomi door window sensors are about, $10 or something. And you just stick them on and write a few lines of YAML and that's actually been really useful. Or another one was, up in the attic, up in the loft, we've got, I had one of these old Lightify lights that I didn't actually use very much, but I thought, well, if I put it up there, it'll still work as a kind of Zigbee repeater. We had a plug socket in the loft, but we didn't have wiring for light switches and all of that stuff. So again, I just put one of these door window sensors on the loft hatch. So whenever I get the ladder, because I need that for mine, and I open the loft hatch, this light comes on somewhere in the loft, and when I close the loft hatch, it goes off, and there was no wiring or anything involved. And again, just the ease with which you can do that kind of stuff, really, really, I thought was kind of fun. So that's something. Then I've got a few more, bigger projects I did. One of them was in one of the bathrooms. We've got the standard thing of you pull the light switch, the light comes on, the fan comes on, and after you leave, you turn the light switch off and the fan turns off a little while later on a timer. Right. And the trouble was that timer was too long. My brother was staying with me and he told me that it had kept him awake for 25 minutes or something like that. So I wanted to go and adjust the timer. And to do that, I have to get the ladder, I have to go up into the loft where the fan is, I have to go to the most inaccessible and dark area of the loft, I have to burrow through the glass fiber insulation to get to the fan motor, and then you unscrew the top and you take a very small screwdriver and you turn a tiny little screw a certain amount, and then you go all the way back downstairs and you turn the light on and you turn the light off and you wait, 20 minutes and you discover, oh no, that's still too long. And then you kind of repeat this. And I thought, this is too hard. I ought to be able to set this time out.
This sounds like a hassle.
Right. Yeah. I ought to be able to do this in software. So of course I then spent a day or something building a system that let me do this. But basically I ended up with, 2 Shelly, devices up there, one of which, controlled the lights, and one of which controlled the fan, and, one of them is sensing the light pull.
Right.
And so firstly, that let me control the timing on both of these, but it also meant that I could do things like now when you go into the bathroom, you turn the light switch on and 2 minutes later the fan starts. So if you're just going in for a brief visit or, to clean your teeth or something like that, you probably don't need the fan. And then it turns off, 5 minutes after the light is turned out. But that's something I can now control under software without requiring, up and digging through the glass fiber and so on. So that's been very nice. And it does mean, of course, I can now turn it on with motion sensors and things as well if I want to. Though you start having to think, now, what's the right interaction here? So if you go into the bathroom and the motion sensor says, okay, you're here and you've been here for a certain amount of time, then I'm going to turn the fan on, and then you go out and you pull the light switch as you go out. What are all the right interactions for, for how that should work, the sort of state machine you have to build up about, okay, so, what do I mean by pulling a light switch now? Am I overriding the timers? Am I overriding the motion sensors? And thinking about that is quite complex. Which is why I think this home automation stuff tends to be a very personal thing, right? It's so much about how you use your house. It's why it's very difficult to do it as a product. Some of the things I've done in the house are very much dependent on obviously the way we do it. And if I were trying to design a generic product for people.
I remember I was talking, we had Adam, I was on his YouTube channel and I used the example of, imagine you've got 3 identical houses. They are on the same street, they're identical layouts, floor plans, you can't automate them exactly the same way. Like one family might be, an elderly couple that goes to bed at, 7 o'clock. The next family might be just, have 4 young kids, and the next family might have a newborn. And, like completely different use cases, what people might be staying home. Some people might be working full time. Like automations are so unique to not only people's houses, what features they have in their houses, but also the people in the house as well.
The personality. Yeah.
And so things like Nest thermostats and so on are great. I think it's the concept of a learning system is great if you have a very learnable life, right? Mm-hmm. But we work on different places on different days of the week at different times, and that's that would be much harder for a thing to learn. I did in the end get to install an app on my wife's phone, which is the Home Assistant app, so we could do some of the geofencing stuff. So when she's working in the university, the temperature in her study here goes down, and the same for me. So, the certain rooms are kept at different temperatures depending on whether we're working from home or working from working elsewhere. But this idea of personalization, I mean, one of the other things we've got is, I mentioned earlier, is some of our window blinds are automated. At least we have motors on them and an app that controls them. These are Rollies blinds, which work quite nicely, but aren't very easy to integrate with anything else. There's no obvious API to talk to the hub or anything at the moment, but it does have an RS485 serial interface on the back so that you can integrate it with much more complex systems that are running Control 4 and so on. So I wrote a little plugin, or an add-on to be strict, which basically talked serial over this thing and interface to MQTT, so I could then interface to it with Home Assistant, so I could make the blinds go up and down. So this was very cool. And then the question is, when do you want your blinds to go up and down? So we do those on timers usually, or on brightness when we're away as a security measure. But when we're here, what I ended up with was the blinds go down when the sun is about 3 or 4 degrees below the horizon, which is about the right level of brightness for us. Except there are 2 windows that our dog really likes looking out of, even when it's dark. Right? So on those windows, the blinds come down to about 2 feet from the floor and stop. And so the spaniel can keep looking out of the windows. And at midnight, they go down the rest of the way. And then in the morning, when do you want them to come up? And, sometimes we wake up at different times, at different levels. You don't necessarily want them to start coming up when the sun comes up and so on. So, but again, our life is very varied. So what I now have is that in the morning, if the sun is up, and you start walking around, then the motion sensors cause the blinds to go up in the rooms in which you're walking around.
Right.
So again, it's very much tailored for what works for us, but it's...
Have you done anything with like the angles of the sun? Because I have my blinds automated, and for example, depending on the time of year, if it's in the morning, the sun is shining in my office and where my screen is. So if the sun's at a certain angle and a certain elevation and my computer monitor turns on and the power starts drawing, I have the blinds come down so I can actually see the screen. Have you gone to that level yet?
No, you live in Australia. I live in England. We don't have sunshine here.
Oh yeah, you don't get the sun. That's right.
That's right. At least not. It's very. If it's enough of a problem that we we have to close the blinds, then we're out playing, right? It's so
yeah.
Now, I mean, it could be actually. To be honest, I don't. When did I put this in? Well, I think I got the integration going. It may actually be more recent. I'm not sure if I've been through a summer with these automated blinds, so we might end up doing something like that. But no, at the moment I don't do that. So that's still to come, perhaps. So then another thing I did was. We've got an alarm system, which is just a standalone alarm, not Home Assistant or anything. It's a conventional security alarm. But I did want to know when it was armed and when it was disarmed, and it has some output relays. It's outputs on it that you can use to turn on lights or sirens or whatever. And so I got a little ESP8266 based board and a couple of relays and so on, and I rigged something up so that basically I used ESP Home for this, so that essentially Home Assistant gets an input when the alarm is armed, when it's disarmed, or indeed if it detects an intruder. So that's, again, I'm not controlling the security in any way through Home Assistant, but I can actually get visibility on it. You could use that to maybe make deductions about when somebody was home or not. So,
I think alarm panels are the best way to do presence.
Yeah, I think they might be, though. We set ours. We don't always set it when we leave the house. I probably shouldn't broadcast this, but we do set it. We do set it at night. Set it at night, and so that was my only real time playing with ESP Home. But that was very good fun. What about you guys? Do you use? I've got a mix of Tasmota and ESP Home here, and I haven't decided whether to jump one way or the other on my other devices. Do you have experience on this?
I am very anti-soldering, so I haven't bothered to try and go down that path yet. I know, Rohan, you bought something. I don't know if you ever ended up implementing it.
I never have, because that actually requires me to do something. No, I did get ESP8266s because I wanted to build a LED controller to have LED lights around the house. And this is a project that I thought I wanted to do like 4 years ago that I still haven't done.
Right.
And I still do want to do, so the intention is still there.
Yeah, if the bits were more expensive, you'd have more of an incentive actually to do it, wouldn't it?
Right.
But because they're cheap, you think, oh, I'll do that sometime. I'll get a couple, and then they sit around. Yeah, but I have got quite a lot of sort of son-off devices, smart plugs and things like that. And in general, I've flashed those with Tasmota, though I could flash them with ESP Home, and ESP Home gives you a lot more customizability in some ways, and it links very easily into Home Assistant, but it does mean, I think, that you couldn't use it with anything other than Home Assistant, or you'd need to reflash it if you were going to, whereas Tasmota just normally works through MQTT or a REST interface, so if you did decide to switch to anything else, then, or if the person who bought your house after you decided to switch to something else, they could use MQTT, so that's the reason I've done that. But
yeah, which is a, I don't know, I think it's a decent strategy, right? So I have a question though. So you mentioned you have a let's call it a smart electric car, right? Yeah. It's got the BMW what do they call it? Connected? That's right. So they call it Connected Drive, and there's a Python module called Bimmer Connected, which is which I think probably from people reverse engineering the website has talks to the BMW servers and can do this. And then there's a nice Home Assistant plugin which makes use of that underlying library. Yeah. So I can ask, one of the things I get out of it actually is location. So when the car stops or starts or charges, when it changes state, it doesn't track it all the time. But when there's a significant change of state, like you stop or lock the doors or something, then I think it reports its location. So I do know when the car is at home and when it isn't, and you can do things with that. Well, which leads to actually part two of my question, which is, so do you start using it for presence? Do you start saying, okay, if car is home, then Quentin is home, or like...
Yeah, I haven't done that much, and the only reason I haven't is that both my wife and I use the iOS app, and it just works really well for us for presence.
It does.
And since we're normally the only people coming in and out of the house, and we normally have our phones with us, and we do use this, so we turn the outside lights on when we get within about 100 meters of the house, for example, and we turn the heating down when we're at our respective other offices in a different part of town and so on. But no, I don't. Presence to the extent that we do it, other than that, is really just motion detectors in the house, right? If we're right. If there's someone moving around, it might be the dog. The dog can do some of these things. She's discovered the lights go on and go off when she walks around, but which is probably good for security as well. But no, we haven't done any more complex presence detection than that. I did at one point start talking to my router and look at whether my phone was on the Wi-Fi network and so on, but I haven't found the need for it. The iOS app seems to work very well for what we need. And it also, my wife usually cycles to and from work, and so I have a zone set up, which is deliberately on the route that she normally takes when she's cycling home from work. So I get a little notification from Home Assistant saying, she's on her way home kind of thing. So I know to go and unlock the door or whatever we might need to do.
Right.
Turn the oven on, whatever it may be. So
yeah. To turn off the PlayStation, turn off the Xbox.
That's right. Yeah. Pretend I've been working really hard all day.
Yeah.
So, and then there have just been a few other things like, the university computing department where I work some of the time has a weather station on the roof, which has been recording, the weather here for 25 years or something. And I discovered that I could basically pull the latest weather from there just as a text file. And so I wrote a little Home Assistant plugin, which is very, very specific. If you happen to live in Cambridge, England, you can get the current weather, which is actually more accurate than dark sky or even the government meteorological office. So that works very well for us.
Nice.
I am interested in this idea of reliability. I mean, so Home Assistant has been very reliable for me recently since I worked out that it was my hardware problem. But yeah, at a certain point, I'm going to start saying, I really don't need this Hue hub anymore, for example. At the moment, I've got two Zigbee networks. Actually, I think, Phil, you were saying you'd had some trouble with Zigbee. I haven't. It's always been really, really solid for me. Did you manage to sort out those issues? Or
Yeah. Since moving to the decons, I have a solid single Zigbee network. I did have... I was running 3 Zigbee networks because the CC2531, their range was just terrible. I couldn't get them to mesh with... Zigbee to MQTT wouldn't mesh with a lot of my downlights, which my downlights are everywhere in the house, so they're not being able to be used for meshing just meant that there was no range on the network. Moving over to decons, I now can use those bulbs to mesh correctly, and I have full range everywhere, so I've been able to get rid of everything else except for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always worked very well for me. I have these 2 Zigbee networks, which is a pain because I've got, probably 30, maybe even 40 Hue bulbs now around the house. So they make a really good mesh, and all of my other stuff is not on that mesh. And when I do eventually combine them, it'll be like the most awesome Zigbee mesh. But one thing I did discover was that I think I had, at one point, I had some serious overlap between my Wi-Fi channels and my Zigbee channels, because they're all in the 2.4 gigahertz space. And if you can work out which Zigbee channels overlap with which Wi-Fi channels, and I've now been fairly careful to say, I'm going to use Wi-Fi on these channels, I'm going to use Zigbee on these channels,
right.
and that just means that it's been much more reliable for me. And, I just throw that out there in case anyone else is struggling with the same thing. You have to go and look up. I did a blog post on this about what the different Zigbee channels are that overlap with which Wi-Fi channels, but you can find it in various places. And it can be worth fixing that rather than having them each try and do it automatically. And then I got Unify base stations, which are great, and and so I've got a few of those around the house. And the problem is that they're really good at making the most of your Wi-Fi bandwidth. And if you let them auto select the channels, they do a great job of it for Wi-Fi, but that means they take up all of the 2.4 gigahertz space.
Yeah.
And I actually had to restrict them a bit and say, actually, no, come on, leave this little bit free. I want to use that for Zigbee. But other than that, it's worked very well. And for the Zigbee network that isn't Philips, I've got some of those. I think I may have heard it on the podcast. IKEA do Zigbee repeaters, so Trad-free.
Yeah,
I don't know how you pronounce Trad-free.
Yeah.
But that's a really cheap place to get, little Zigbee repeaters that are discrete and just plug into the wall. And as a way of extending Zigbee range, that's worked very well for me as well. So.
Yeah. I love their little bulbs. So.
You're right. I haven't tried any of their other Zigbee stuff, but this works very nicely as it paired easily with ZHA and my combi stick. So that's working very nicely. I guess one thing I haven't really got into on Home Assistant is switching back into doing everything through the GUI. I still like doing stuff through YAML, and I think you guys probably do too. But do you think you're gonna?
Yep.
Is this a trend that you're going to go back to GUI stuff as it gets more powerful?
Yeah, So for me, I want to say yes, but I have I don't want to say it's a nice workflow. Let's call it a comfortable workflow that I have right now through Git and through all of this stuff. That it's a comfort thing, right?
Yeah, you get version control, right? If you start doing everything through the GUI, how do you? I guess you can have snapshots. Probably they capture it, don't they? But
yeah, and it's the most illogical reason why I'm not moving to full blown Lovelace. I think, and don't get me wrong, there are a couple of things that Lovelace can't do yet, right? But does that affect me a ton? No, but it's just a comfort thing. I just got used to doing it this one way, so now that's just the way I'm doing it.
And if you edit the automations in the GUI, you lose any comments you might have had in the YAML. I think they re-edit the YAML, don't they? And so I like putting lots of comments in. One of the great things about YAML is you can stick comments in a way that you can't normally do with JSON or something.
I think they may have fixed that in one of the versions.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, it's a tricky thing to do to read in the YAML, edit it, and write it out again without losing the comments. So if they have, that would be kind of impressive. But I'm still doing the YAML thing all the way through, and I use YAML in a variety of different scenarios. So I guess I'm familiar with it from outside the Home Assistant world, very familiar with it. So it's very easy for me. But I do wonder whether we'll see everybody switching over. The trend definitely seems to be in that direction, but there are things I think you do miss if you go to editing it through the GUI. I haven't jumped yet. Yeah. So anyway, lots of fun. No very big projects. So though, I was very pleased with getting the window blinds talking to it, because that involved soldering and it involved RS-485, which I had to learn about, and it involved, my first bit of async Python 3 code, and it involved, all of this stuff. But actually, it works very nicely now, and at least it did until about 3 days ago when my Rollies hub died, and it was when. So I need to go and get another one of those. I think it should still be under warranty, but it made me realize how much I liked it, right? It's when this stuff goes away that you realize, oh no, I actually was relying on this much more than I thought. So it's this stuff does, after a while you think, oh yeah, of course the lights turn on when I walk into a room, and then you go somewhere where they don't, and you find, oh God, how primitive.
It doesn't work.
Well, it's cool because it starts changing your entire mindset of, let's call it life, right? Like it is. It's definitely a drug.
It is a drug, and it's great fun, and it's not too expensive a drug ually, and it's
as drugs go.
It can be. As drugs go, that's right. You speak from experience, and particularly, it can be a very creative process, right? You are positively affecting your living space in a way that gives you satisfaction and a sense of creativity and a sense of accomplishment, and I think it's great fun. And maybe when we're all isolated with coronavirus and we have to stay home, we can all spend a lot more time tweaking our automations to make our living space even more customized to us.
All right. Well, Quentin, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. You've got a really cool setup, and I'm loving all your interesting use cases and having to go up into lofts and get timers working the way you wanted it.
Yeah, it's lots of fun. And can I say on behalf of everyone as well, thank you very much to you guys. I mean, I think this podcast is one of the really great aspects of the community, and you make it look effortless, but I know that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes here to make this all go as smoothly as it does, and it's very much appreciated. A lot of my dog walks, I usually listen to this while walking the dog, and knowing what all the breaking changes are and what I'm going to have to fix when I get home and so on is it's a very nice and easy way to keep up to date with what's going on. So thank you very much. It's really appreciated.
No, thank you. Appreciate that.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been great fun.
Quentin, thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. It's been really good fun.
Cheers.
If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics that we discussed today, check out our show notes on haspodcast.io.